I want you to imagine sitting in a room that you've lived in for years.
Yeah, a space you know completely.
Exactly. You know the space intimately. You know the structural flow, the architectural dimensions. You know the precise way the four corners hold the ceiling and the walls together in this, very predictable, stable geometry.
Right.
But one afternoon, you look up and you suddenly realize you can see a fifth corner
Just out of nowhere.
out of
Yeah.
nowhere. And it is not a shadow. It is not an optical illusion. It is an entirely new spatial dimension, a geometric fold, just physically intruding right into your reality.
It is a phenomenal, deeply unsettling thought experiment. Welcome to this deep dive into excerpts from a novel called The Proof by the Fevered Geometrist, which is authored by Max and Claude.
We've got a really dense stack of source materials from this text today.
We do. And our mission today is to guide you through the epistemological crisis at its core. This narrative acts as this really rigorous exploration of topology, the strict biological limitations of human perception, and, frankly, the razor-thin margin between discovering a universal mathematical truth and experiencing a total cognitive collapse.
We're going to unpack what happens when a flawlessly coherent mathematical system directly contradicts a person's functional reality. We're looking at the friction between abstract proof and physical existence.
And asking a rather terrifying question.
Yeah, if the math dictates that the universe is structured in a way you cannot perceive, can you ever trust your own senses again?
To frame that question, we really have to examine our protagonist, Marcus Webb. He's a 37-year-old mathematician. The source text rapidly establishes his psychological architecture.
Right, because for Marcus, mathematics is not simply an academic pursuit.
No, not at all. It is a structural necessity for his mental equilibrium. He recounts his childhood, sitting and listening to his mother's piano students butchering temporal rhythms, just completely violating the underlying structural relationship between the notes.
Yeah, that part really stood out. From a very young age, mathematics became his sanctuary. It was this place of absolute objective order.
He filters his entire existence through that need for structural division. He lives on Mercer Street in a building constructed in 1923.
And he finds a deep, visceral comfort in the fact that 1923 is a semi-prime number.
Right, the product of two prime numbers, 41 and 47.
He explicitly notes that this even division is the mechanism that, quote, prevents. It keeps the chaos of an asymmetrical universe at bay. He absolutely requires that unyielding structure.
His specific domain is topology, dealing with properties of space that are preserved under continuous deformations. Think of a coffee mug turning into a donut. He is comfortable dealing with complex spatial invariants, completely content in the abstract realm.
Until Vienna.
Right, that insulation totally shatters at a conference in Vienna.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the Vienna Conference is the absolute catalyst for the entire crisis. Marcus is presenting his latest work on four-dimensional manifolds. And during a break, he's approached by Dr. Yale Hofstadter.
She praises his derivations, but asks a highly technical, completely destabilizing question.
Yeah, she essentially asks why his work assumes a flat Euclidean background space. She says, and this is the direct quote, "What if you allowed the background geometry to flex?"
It is a brilliant provocation. In topological mathematics, the moment you introduce non-Euclidean curvature into the background space, the fundamental constraints of your equations shift dramatically. Dr. Hofstadter is pushing him to map his abstract manifolds onto reality.
Because we know from Einstein's field equations and general relativity that our physical universe is not strictly Euclidean. Gravity curves space-time.
Exactly. Dr. Hofstadter suggests that if Marcus applied his topological parameters to the actual measured curvature of physical spacetime, a highly complex four-dimensional manifold wouldn't just be a theoretical possibility, the math would actually force it to exist.
So Marcus returns to his apartment and just spirals into an 11-month obsession. He isolates himself, he rigorously grinds through the derivations.
And in mathematics, a proof is not a hypothesis.
Right.
It is an ironclad, logically inescapable reality. Finally, in April, the architecture of the proof locks into place. He proves that, given the precise tensor metrics of physical space as described by general relativity, this impossible four-dimensional manifold must exist within our physical reality.
And his senior colleagues vet the proof.
Yeah.
The math is flawless.
What's fascinating here is the sheer weight of the philosophical leap Marcus is suddenly confronting. The proof dictates that within the parameters of our actual reality, this manifold exists. The unavoidable conclusion is that actual physical space is folded and dimensionally complex in ways that human beings simply cannot perceive.
Space-time possesses a topological structure that completely bypasses our neurological hardware.
It's invisible to us.
I'd like you, the listener, to view this through the lens of the user interface theory of perception. Think of your visual field not as a window into objective reality, but as a computer desktop.
That's a great way to think about it.
Your brain provides a simplified interface designed purely for efficiency and survival. An icon on your desktop doesn't look anything like the actual microprocessors and lines of code it represents. Because if you had to perceive the raw binary code of your computer just to send an email, you'd never get anything done.
You'd be paralyzed.
Completely paralyzed. Human evolution gave you a 3D Euclidean interface to navigate gravity, to find food, to avoid predators. You were functionally blind to the 4D topological source code of the universe, because perceiving it offers zero evolutionary advantage.
That is precisely the epistemological nightmare Marcus wakes up to. He understands that ordinary perception is merely a functional filter, but the knowledge that the objective universe is fundamentally alien to his perception becomes this chronic, insistent pain for him.
He is trapped in a binary.
Yes. Either his flawless mathematical frameworks are entirely wrong, which completely nullifies modern science, or the physical world is terrifyingly complex, and we are navigating it with the sensory equivalent of a blindfold.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Marcus does something reckless. He decides to try and bypass his biological interface.
He wants to see the source code.
He wants to see the code. He sits in his Mercer Street apartment, specifically avoiding looking at the room as a container for his life, and instead attempts to process the raw, uninterpreted visual data of the north wall.
And in July, the barrier breaches.
For 3 seconds.
3 seconds. He registers an irregularity in the flatness of the wall. It is a curve bending in a direction that completely defies our spatial vocabulary. It is not up, down, left, or right. It is a distinct fourth-dimensional vector.
And the text emphasizes the undeniable immediacy of this visual data. It's not a trick of the light.
No, it's visceral. And naturally, as a scientist, he attempts to quantify it. He brings in a 3D laser measuring device. He uses high-resolution cameras.
But the laser registers a perfectly flat plane. The camera captures 4 standard corners.
Marcus hits the ultimate measurement problem. His instruments are constrained by the exact same 3D physics his brain is trying to bypass.
Right, a three-dimensional tool structurally cannot capture a 4D fold. If you shine a laser at a wall, the light is traveling and reflecting in 3D space. It is mathematically impossible for it to map the 4th dimension. He writes in his notebook, "The eye sees what the ruler cannot measure."
It's chilling. Let's look at how he tries to validate this, though. Marcus attends a workshop and encounters a philosopher, Dr. Sarah Chen.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
She introduces a concept called the seduction of coherence. She argues that when a mathematical model is exceptionally elegant and internally consistent, it triggers a profound cognitive bias. It feels undeniably true.
She points to Ptolemaic astronomy, the geocentric model of the universe.
Exactly. It was an incredibly coherent, functional mathematical system. The math worked so well that it successfully predicted planetary movements and eclipses for centuries. It felt incredibly true, but structurally, it was entirely false. The Earth is not the center of the universe.
I have to say, I am not completely sold on Dr. Chen's framing here. She looks at Marcus's proof, verifies it as perfect, but then tells him mathematical existence doesn't guarantee physical existence. That feels like a philosopher moving the goalposts just because the implications of the math are too uncomfortable.
Well, she is trying to ground him.
Sure, but when Marcus admits he is actually seeing the geometric fold in his wall, her immediate response is to ask, "When is the last time you slept well?" She instantly medicalizes his discovery.
It might be a medicalization, but it highlights the structural trap Marcus is in. This raises an important question, which is brilliantly articulated by another philosopher in the text, James Okafor.
James is much more direct about the danger.
He is. James points out that Marcus is caught in a closed epistemological loop. Marcus is using his mathematical proof to justify his aberrant visual perception, and simultaneously using his visual perception to validate the physical reality of his proof.
Which is a massive red flag.
Exactly. James warns him that this self-reinforcing circular loop is the exact cognitive architecture of a delusion. From the inside of a delusion, an elaborate self-deception is completely indistinguishable from a profound scientific epiphany.
But Marcus is way past the point of philosophical debate. By April, the subtle curve deepens into permanence. It manifests as a definite, unyielding 5th corner in the northwest quadrant of his ceiling.
He can sit in a chair and just stare at it.
5 corners, a prime number. The symmetrical, even division that used to protect his sanity, that 1923 semi-pronged comfort, is completely obliterated.
And this is when the narrative introduces a broader community to this crisis. Marcus receives an anonymous handwritten note
From someone claiming to have pursued the same topological derivations 15 years prior.
he also validates him, writing, "The proof is correct. The manifold exists. The implications are what you think they are." But the note pivots into a stark warning. The question is not whether to believe it, but whether you can afford to.
The author begs him not to count the corners.
The note provides an address, St. Augustine's on Clement Street.
Marcus eventually attends, and the scene is incredible. It is a support group operating in the basement of a Catholic church, facilitated by a man named Gregory.
But it isn't for substance abuse or grief. It is a clandestine gathering for individuals suffering from, quote, perceptual integration difficulties related to abstract reasoning.
It is a sanctuary for physicists and mathematicians whose cognitive interfaces have literally buckled under the weight of abstract truth.
If we look at the real-world history of mathematics, this isn't purely fiction. We have figures like Georg Cantor, who formalized the mathematical concepts of infinity and spent his later years in sanatoriums. Or Kurt Gödel, the logician who proved the incompleteness theorems and eventually starved himself to death due to extreme paranoia.
There is a historical precedent of brilliant minds disintegrating when they push too far past the boundaries of human intuition.
The people in this church basement, smelling of stale coffee and sitting in folding chairs, are grappling with that exact threshold.
An older woman in the group, a former topologist, offers Marcus a mechanism for survival. She introduces a concept from Husserlian phenomenology called epoche.
Husserl used epoche to describe the suspension of our natural attitude toward reality, a bracketing off of assumptions.
But this woman in the basement uses it as a blunt instrument for psychological survival. She tells Marcus that the mathematical truth of the manifold doesn't disappear, but he must actively compartmentalize it. He must place the absolute truth in a mental box and consciously, deliberately refuse to engage with it.
Strictly so he can continue to function in a three-dimensional society. I want you to consider the weight of that strategy in your own life. Have you ever possessed a piece of knowledge, a fundamental truth about an institution you work for, a complex relationship, or a harsh reality about the world that was objectively accurate, but you made the conscious choice to bracket it?
You chose to look away.
You suspended your engagement with that truth simply because acknowledging it continuously would render your daily functioning impossible. That is the survival mechanism this group is practicing, applied to the literal geometry of the universe.
Well, I find that approach almost tragic. It's a surrender. And Marcus refuses to surrender. He chooses to look directly at the fold,
which initiates a severe cognitive and physical spiral.
He ceases basic biological functions. He stops sleeping, stops eating. He covers the walls of his apartment in dense topological equations, desperately trying to perceive the whole proof at once. His reality fractures entirely.
And that fracture predictably bleeds into his academic responsibilities. He is scheduled to teach introductory calculus,
The mathematics of infinitesimals and continuous limits.
Instead, he begins lecturing bewildered undergraduates about the catastrophic breakdown of those mathematical limits in non-Euclidean multidimensional space.
Imagine being a freshman in that class. Chalk snapping on the board. He is trying to explain to students that the physical space containing their desks is folded in ways that render their textbooks totally obsolete.
The university administration swiftly intervenes and removes him from the classroom.
Finally, his colleague James Okafor contacts Marcus's sister. She arrives at his Mercer Street apartment, witnesses the severe degradation, the equations scrawled everywhere, the physical emaciation, and immediately evacuates him to her home in the Midwest.
The text draws an incredibly sharp contrast here. Her suburban environment is characterized by flat topology, rigid grid streets, and identical rectangular yards.
Marcus observes that the spatial geometry of the Midwest is Euclidean in the most reassuring possible way.
That geographical shift provides the reset. In that aggressively flat, normal environment, surrounded by the mundane rhythms of his sister's family, the fifth corner dissolves entirely. He resumes a normal biological schedule, eating regularly and sleeping deeply.
The oppressive weight of the 4D manifold vanishes, replaced by four unambiguous right-angle corners.
When he ultimately returns to Mercer Street, the fifth corner remains absent.
He stands in the center of his room and counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is a moment of profound relief, but also a quiet devastation. The university mandates psychiatric evaluation, and he begins seeing Dr. Reyes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Dr. Reyes offers a brilliant, highly empathetic framework for Marcus's experience. Reyes does not invalidate the mathematics. He affirms that Marcus's proof is a legitimate discovery.
However, he explains that under conditions of extreme psychological strain, sleep deprivation, and obsessive hyperfocus, the neurological firewall between abstract cognitive processing and the visual cortex degrades. I am extremely skeptical of Dr. Reyes here, though. Reyes uses the analogy of a fatigued musician who has studied a score so intensely they literally begin to hear the notes in a silent room. He suggests Marcus's brain became so deeply saturated with the mathematics of the fold that the abstract concept overflowed into visual hallucinations.
It's a plausible medical explanation?
Plausible, yes. But isn't that just an incredibly convenient way for society to neutralize a truth it can't handle? Reyes is using medical terminology to force a four-dimensional mathematical reality back into a three-dimensional psychiatric box.
I see the skepticism, but consider the biological imperative. Whether the manifold is physically real or not, Marcus's biological hardware was catastrophically failing because the software of that mathematical truth was running too hot. The brain is an organ designed for survival, not absolute truth.
It's a meat computer built to find berries and avoid tigers.
Right. Reyes's diagnosis allows Marcus to contextualize his perception as a hardware malfunction rather than a tearing of reality, which is absolutely necessary for his survival.
Fine. It's a necessary fiction for his own survival. And Marcus makes the active choice to accept that framework. He returns to his academic career and publishes his paper, but he neuters it. He makes extraordinarily modest claims, deliberately omitting all the terrifying implications about the physical folding of actual space-time.
He relegates it to an exercise in pure abstraction.
He maintains correspondence with Dr. Chen and occasionally visits the church on Clement Street, not to speak, but to exist in the shared silence. He consciously adopts the strategy of epique, living in what he terms the honest and irreducible uncertainty. He counts his four corners every single day, adopting the vigilance of someone in recovery.
It reads as a definitive resolution. He has achieved a hard-fought, grounded acceptance of his own cognitive limits. He has successfully chosen the necessary illusions of functional reality over the annihilating weight of objective mathematical truth.
So, what does this all mean? If you believe the text leaves us with that comfortable, grounded resolution, the authors have one final maneuver. The source material contains an appendix that completely recontextualizes everything we've just discussed.
The narrative we have been analyzing, Marcus's meticulously documented account of his descent and subsequent recovery, is revealed to be a recovered manuscript.
An editorial note in the appendix explains that these documents were retrieved from Marcus's apartment following a second, catastrophic psychological collapse.
Exactly 14 months after he allegedly achieved peace and stabilized his perception, his sister found him barricaded in his apartment once again.
The concluding pages of the manuscript devolve into fragmented repetition of the text's opening lines. I've counted the corners of my room, and there are 4 corners, and 4 is a number that divides evenly.
The bracketing failed. He had started counting again.
The compartmentalization of epiche was not sustainable. You cannot box up a fundamental architectural truth of the universe and expect the psychological containment to hold indefinitely.
The cognitive friction between functional sanity and mathematical reality is not a battle you win once. It is a permanent condition. The 5th corner returned.
It is a devastating structural conclusion to the text. And it leaves us with an entirely different vector to consider before we wrap up. Throughout this deep dive, we've operated on the premise that biological limits are the ultimate barrier to understanding the universe. Human minds break because they are tethered to biology and the evolutionary requirement of sanity.
Precisely. We require the 3D interface to survive.
If human neurology is fundamentally incapable of perceiving the true mathematical structures of reality without fracturing, consider the trajectory of our technology. We're currently building artificial superintelligence. These are entities that possess no biological imperatives, no evolutionary filters, and zero requirement for human sanity to function.
They don't need to eat. They aren't afraid of predators.
Exactly. If the ultimate non-Euclidean reality of the universe is too heavy for a biological mind to hold, are we simply acting as the biological stepping stones? Are we just building the AI architectures that will finally, coldly perceive the 5th corners of the universe that we cannot afford to see?
That completely reorients the purpose of our own cognitive limits. We may not be the ones meant to read the source code after all.
Something for you to think about the next time you ask an algorithm to solve a problem you can't quite conceptualize. Until next time.